If you're interested in property investment, in business, just in furthering yourself in any area of your life, today's podcast is for you because Mark Creedon and I are going to talk about how to become a power negotiator. We're going to talk about how to become an influencer and a persuader and persuade people to do what you'd like them to do, whether you're buying or selling. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy today's show because if you think about it, you've been negotiating all your life. I remember the days as a kid when I used to trade football cards in the playground at school, but I actually wasn't very good at it, and I used to always get the worst end of the deal, or I used to exchange the sandwiches my mother gave me for somebody else's more appetising lunch. I didn't realise it at the time, but I was learning the art of negotiation. Now, it's not that different as an adult. We're negotiating with utility providers, we negotiate our salaries, whether we're buying or renting, we negotiate property deals, we negotiate with friends, with family. And if you're a business owner, you're going to be negotiating with your team, with clients. Life's a series of negotiations, and I'm going to give you some hints and some information about negotiation in today's podcast from my upgraded book, my best-selling, international bestseller, Negotiate, Influence, Persuade. Mark and I are going to talk about that in a moment. But if you think about it, how many times have you felt you got a bad deal? You could have done better in negotiation. If I asked a group of people to indicate whether they enjoyed being ripped off or taken for a ride, very few people would raise their hands, would they? But if I asked the same group whether they enjoyed landing a good deal or bargaining successfully for what they truly wanted, whether it's property or whatever, you'd see a sea of hands raised, wouldn't you? And yet, despite our love of a good deal, we're often not that good at closing one, whether you're on the sales side or as a consumer. So I hope at the end of today's podcast, you're going to become a better negotiator because I've taught you some tips. You're going to become a better influencer and persuader. So welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Negotiating is part of living. We do it all the time. When you walk down a crowded street, you negotiate, which path you're going to take. Couples negotiate the relationship during your marriage. And even though you might not realise it, even who's going to take out the rubbish bins tonight or who's going to do the dishes. And of course, negotiation is one of the skills developed by all savvy property investors and particularly also business people. Now, over the years, I've noticed that some people are very good at getting terrific deals. Most others, though, they simply get what the other side, the other party, is willing to give. So what's the difference? In my mind, the first group knows how to negotiate. But actually it's more than that. They know how to influence. They know how to persuade others to do what they'd like them to do. So today I'd like to discuss that topic, the topic of negotiation, of influence and persuasion, with Mark Creedon, founder and CEO of Metropole's Business Accelerator Mastermind. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Michael. Michael, all of life, I guess, is a negotiation, isn't it? But the big question is, are you good at it? Now, I know you've written a book, Negotiation, Influence, Persuade, and in fact, it's actually been translated into a number of foreign languages. But more importantly, I think there's a new edition coming out, isn't there?
Yes, it is. In fact, we updated it. I updated it because the world has changed, and while a lot of the principles are still fundamental, now in the age of dealing over Zoom, not always dealing face-to-face, social media, there had to be some updates for the current world. Because I think every time you say, I want or I need, you actually are in a negotiation. Most people don't realise it. In fact, I think the most dangerous negotiation is the one you're in when you don't even realise you're in it.
Well, you're probably not going to win that negotiation, I guess. I have read your book. There's my very well-thumbed copy on the shelves behind me. But in the book, you talk about life being one big negotiation. I mean, you've given a couple of examples, but is that really is it really one big negotiation across life?
Well, by that I don't mean it's actually a conflict. But if you don't realise that you're negotiating whether it is, I mean, the big things, it's obvious I'm going to get a new car, or I want the best table at a restaurant, or as I said a moment ago, who takes the rubbish out, or what are we going to watch tonight? But it is a bargaining, and to be a good negotiator, it will actually make a difference in your life. Now, again, I'm not talking as much about what happens at home or whether you negotiate with your kids, them cleaning up their room before they can play on their iPads. But if you're a poor negotiator in life, you end up spending a fortune. If you're a good negotiator, you actually can save a fortune. But I learned over time, because I didn't start off life as a good negotiator. I didn't even understand that concept. I didn't learn it from my parents. But if you're a great negotiator, you actually can make a fortune. But I've learned it's a skill. Again, it's not something I was born with. In fact, I used to be a sucker for, well, in the old days, it was junk mail, and it was offers that came in the mail. That was long before the offers that come now through social media and on the email. If people had come around the door and offered things, I was a sucker for that. So I didn't realise I was in one big negotiation, Mark. As I started to get involved in property and in business, and I got a number of books early in the piece, I thought, hey, there actually is a skill to this that other people actually had as an innate thing that they'd just learned from their culture or learned from home.
Michael, I actually won the negotiation on what to watch on TV. I bought a second TV, so solved that one. But let's be fair, because your book is actually a lot more than just a book on negotiation, isn't it? And who's it really for, Michael?
Well, yes, negotiation is a word that some people find a little bit offensive. And so we talked also about persuasion and influence. And it's for people, whether it's at home, at work, with family, as I said, in every transaction, there is a buyer and a seller. Even the money doesn't always change hands. So you're either buying what other people are saying, or they're buying what you're saying. So it's not just for salespeople, even though I know a lot of salespeople have bought it, but it's also for consumers, so that they are on the right side of the negotiation. Because as we keep saying, you are in a negotiation all the time, so you may as well understand what you're involved in when you're doing it. So it's negotiating with your life, with partner, with your spouse, with your children, with your work colleagues. So in my mind, understanding these principles have made a big, big difference to me, how I deal with my staff, how I deal with our clients. And in my mind, it's ethical, it's correct, it's the right thing to do. So it's not wrong as long as your intent is correct, Mark.
I think that's a really good point and a really important point, Michael, that because negotiation sometimes just has a bad name, doesn't it? So, what you talk about in the book is around these ethical principles.
Yeah, by the way, you can use them unethically, and I hope people don't take advantage of the book and do that.
Well, 100%. Now, I know for a fact how long it takes to write a book, and you've written just a few more than me. But tell me, what were you thinking? What made you decide to write a book about negotiation, about influencing and persuasion?
Well, I was actually persuaded by my publisher, who said, Michael, you've been involved in millions, in fact, billions of dollars worth of transactions over the years, property in particular, and you seem to have come out on top. What have you learned? How can you help other people? So it really was to help others. I think when you get to the top part of my responsibility, my obligation is to help others as well, because I don't like seeing people taken advantage of. Because when you're dealing, even going into shops, people are taught how to sell you, how to influence you, and especially in real estate, the world you and I work in, and in business where you and I work with our clients at Business Accelerator Mastermind, the concept is, if you've got a good product, if you've got a good service, you really do have to, in this age of cluttered information, be able to get your message across. And so you can interact, you can communicate, you can influence, you can persuade others, because if you can, the level of your income will increase. But more importantly, you're also going to help other people.
Yeah, but for you, Michael, and I know from conversations we've had in the past that what brought about this book was really largely your own life experience, now that you've achieved the point where you can share this knowledge with other people. But you kind of learned it the hard way, didn't you?
I did. I mean, I was a sucker to persuasive salespeople. That was before the days of the internet. As I said, I bought things I didn't need from great salespeople, from direct marketers. I loved those compelling letters. I remember one of the people I learned a lot from was somebody called Jay Abrahams, who's taught you a lot and has taught a lot of marketers a lot. And there was an amazing long letter, I think it was 16, 18 pages, that got me to go to one of his workshops, and I learned a lot from him. He persuaded me, he influenced me to do it. It's worse today for people who don't understand these principles that I share in the book, because they're bombarded with persuasive messages even more than ever. There's the power of the internet, there's the power of email. And I also came over time to realise that in Western cultures, the average person knows very little about negotiating. In fact, it's not a skill that comes naturally to us as it does to other cultures. And so I guess it was a way of evening things out, because unfortunately over the years I've seen many people become, it's a bad word to use, shark bait for people who are smart negotiators. And this is particularly in the case of real estate, where emotions play a big part, but it's not for property. Think about it. At most points, we've all been influenced by a good negotiator. So I'd be good to the person just listening to this to have a think about, have you ever experienced a time when you've been moved to act, compelled to do something, to buy something, you were prepared to do almost anything to get it, and then think about it, why? Why did that person get you to do that? How did they get you to overcome your fears to take action? And I guess the concept behind the book is, what would it be like if you could bottle that power? What would it be like if you could harness that, the ability to persuade others to move through their hesitations and act on their suggestions? And I know that for our clients at Business Accelerator Mastermind, when we had a recent intensive, we gave the book as a gift to them, because even successful business people, successful entrepreneurs, it's not something they spend a lot of time learning about.
Well, it's not. It's because I guess it's something that isn't really taught. And particularly so for professionals, Mike, when you think about it, and we have this conversation a lot, professionals, they're taught to be great doctors or dentists or lawyers or engineers, architects, but not really how to be great business people, and absolutely certainly not to negotiate.
And it's a cultural thing also. It's almost embarrassing for us to do it, while if you came from other parts of the world, it would be totally wrong not to negotiate.
Well, it'd be fully expected that you actually would know how to negotiate. So when back in the 80s, I mean, you went studying the best of the best, and you got some great principles. Who were the sort of, you've mentioned Jay Abrahams, but I know you also got some principles from some other people as well.
Well, I think the first book I learned about negotiation was from somebody called Herb Cohen, who wrote a book many, many years ago. And I thought, hey, there's actually an art to this. There's a science to this. And then somebody who very much changed how I deal with people, and I learned a lot about the psychology behind it, was a Professor Robert Cialdini, who's still around, who wrote the book Persuasion, how to get people to say yes. And now he's written a book about persuasion, and definitely something I would recommend, a book I'd recommend people read. And then Brian Tracy was a great influencer. In fact, I remember I spent a day with Brian in Adelaide, a personal day. We had some time, Pam and I took him out to Hansdorf and showed him around a bit of Australia. And he was a great influencer on many people involved in sales and business, wasn't he?
Well, he was. But I guess, Michael, if you look at, back then there was an entirely different paradigm. The world's changed a lot since you studied those concepts, because I hate to point this out, mate, but it's close to 40 years ago.
Well, you're right. And in those days, the sales techniques were, hey, you scare people, you create a gap, and then you learn 50 different ways of handling their objections. Do you want the red or the blue? Do you want it delivered next Monday or next Friday? But it's now changed. The paradigm was based on trusting others until they gave you a reason not to. But today the sales process, I guess it's been turned on its head, Mark. It's based much more on people needing to trust you first. You've got to spend time getting to know your prospect or your customer, what they want, what they need, what they feel, what they desire. And especially in today's very challenging economic environment where people want to feel safe and they don't want to be scammed. So to become a power negotiator, in my mind, you actually have to be a student of human psychology, of human nature. And in fact, there are sections in my book on body language and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Oh, and I forgot. There was another person I learned a lot from who was a good friend of both yours and mine, and that was the late Wayne Berry, who wrote a book on negotiation, and I know we both learned a lot from him over the years.
Yeah, yes. Unfortunately, we lost Wayne a few years ago, but yeah, absolutely. Michael, look, I've read your book. The thing that I really liked about your book is how it does differ from the others. I mean, if you read lots of blogs, you watch videos you read books on negotiation, there tends to be this secret to negotiation is actually meeting somebody halfway.
Yeah.
Finding that, let's find the middle ground. But that's actually not what you advocate, is it?
No, let's be honest, we don't want the middle ground. We don't really want to meet halfway. That depends what we're talking about. But if you want to walk away with the best deal, you're going to have to learn how to persuade others to want what you want. You're going to want to learn how to give a teeny bit so that the person comes over to where you are, to your point of view. And for you to get what you want, you're going to have to somehow or other cause others to do what you want. Now, don't get me wrong, you still, in my mind, you've got to do the right thing by people. So as I said a moment ago, the difference in my mind between manipulation and persuasion is intent. So I think if business people have a good product or service they're selling, if professionals believe that they're the best lawyer, the best dentist, I'm going to look after your teeth better than other people, then it's their obligation to help people and learn how to do this, because people are scared about taking on orthodontic work or paying professionals. Mark, in fact, it's even, we only spoke before we clicked the record button, people are scared of getting a coach, a business coach,
Yeah.
which is something that you're doing. Some people don't believe that the intent is right and it can help them.
I think intent's such an important part. But you've just reminded me, next time we go out for dinner, I won't offer to pay half.
That's right.
So, Michael, prior to you writing this book, where do you think people learned to negotiate successfully?
Well, there's no school on negotiation, is there? So those who've successful at negotiation became so, I think, sometimes by doing deals, they learn from experience. But it seems that some people have a natural talent for it. And over the years, I learned there was a number of rules for it. So I have learned and become a better negotiator because I learned about NLP in the 1990s, which was just, some people call it was called neuro-linguistic programming. It's actually how people think and how people react, and learning about rapport and learning about psychology. All that has to do with negotiation. Now, again, for some people who it comes naturally, in some cultures where it comes naturally, that may not be necessary. But for a lot of us, we've really got to go back and learn some of these techniques. I know you learned psychology, which has made you a much better coach because you understand the way people think.
Yeah, that's right. But then you've got to think about not the technical learning, because one thing university does is it makes you a very good technician, but it doesn't necessarily make you a very good practical applicator. Michael, you talk about rules of negotiation, right? So in your book, you talk about 27 rules. Now, we don't have time to go through 27, and that would be a shame, because if we did, people wouldn't read your book, and I think they'd miss all of the great information that sits between these rules. Let's talk about a couple of those rules, though.
Okay, so let's do a shameless plug for the book. You can go to negotiateinfluencepersuade.com and get your copy, or go to michaelyardneybooks.com.au and get a copy, and I'll leave a link in the show notes. But yeah, I actually did outline a number of rules that I believe are important. And I think the first one that people should realize is that everything is negotiable. That doesn't mean you're always going to get what you want. It definitely doesn't mean you're going to win every negotiation. And I think, Mark, you also got to learn which ones to fight over and which not.
Yep.
But for a lot of things, the price on many items has been made up by somebody, which means that somebody else can actually say, why don't we change it? So nothing is non-negotiable, even when the other party tells you so. But again, some things, you're not going to negotiate on the ice cream that you buy from the local shop or the 7-Eleven. It's not worth it. But there are other areas in life that you should think, hey, why don't I ask for a discount or an extra? And I guess that's one of the things that business people have to learn a lot.
Well, they do. They need to understand that everything is in fact negotiable. But I guess the other thing that I got out of your book was not just knowing that everything is negotiable, but you actually have to know what you want before you go into the negotiation, Michael, don't you?
Well, that's a really good point, because a lot of people actually go into a negotiation and then decide what they want, what price they want, what they're prepared to pay, which car they're going to get. I think if that's the case, then you're already beginning the negotiation on the back foot. It's a bit like when you're planning for a holiday. First you decide your destination, where you want to end up, and then you work backwards from it. So negotiation, as well as, I guess, other parts of life, if you don't have a plan of your own, you're going to become the plan of somebody else, and you know what he's got in mind for you.
Well, and nobody wants to be in that position. Take us through another one of the rules. Let's look at another couple. Hey, we've got a little bit of time.
Well, treating negotiation as a game is important. I think it's important to be involved, but not too much. So if you're too emotionally involved, you lose your perspective. You make emotional rather than subjective decisions. Now, this is particularly of interest in the area that a lot of people are listening to this podcast about property. But like all games, you've got to understand the rules, and a skilled negotiator understands that big negotiations have a structure. There are stages, and I actually outline that in the book. So again, if you're negotiating, can I please buy a bottle of milk, or if I get two, I will get a bit of a discount. That's not the same as for the big things, which have a beginning, an end, a middle. And so if you don't know the rules, how do you know when the game's even begun? How do you know when it reached the midpoint or near the conclusion? Because when you're talking about cars, when you're talking about real estate, you're dealing with salespeople who probably done lots of ongoing, regular negotiating training, Mark.
Yeah, so you're playing a game, Michael, with someone who's a seasoned player. They're well experienced at it. So understanding that. Hey, one of the other things that I saw in the book, we're talking about rules, if you don't mind me jumping in on one, is I love this, the concept of striving to be innocent. You know, I think you said to power negotiators, what is it? Smart is dumb and dumb is smart.
I'm old enough to remember the TV show Columbo. Are you?
Yes, I do. Just one more thing. Peter Falk.
Yeah, that's right. He played the detective who walked around. He was in that old raincoat and in a mental fog, and he chewed on an old cigar butt. But he wore this expression that suggested he misplaced something. He was looking around. He couldn't remember, let alone where he'd left whatever he'd lost. And by acting dumb, people were happy to help him. So in a lot of negotiation, people want to act as they're the smartest person. Again, if we're talking about real estate and somebody said, this is what the agent says, this is what I think this property should go for. Now, you've done your homework, you've done your research. We've already said that. You should have done your pre-negotiation due diligence and seen what's going on. But you're much better off saying something along the lines of, I don't know, I'm new to this. You're the expert. You're going to have to help me understand this. And you'll often find other people smile. They think they've got you where they want you. But that's not the case at all. It's the other way around. They often reveal more than they would care to if you're innocent than if you act smart and show off. So while most people are eager to talk and show off, I'd rather play the Columbo, and you'd be surprised how much you learn if you act innocent and dumb.
Well, otherwise, Michael, it becomes a bit of a battle of egos, really, doesn't it? If I'm negotiating with a real estate salesperson or a car salesperson, and I walk in and act like I know so much and I'm fully informed, then it just becomes an ego as to see who can win. And then you're winning the ego game, not the negotiation game.
Sure. So part of that's also asking questions. So apart from acting dumb, don't be afraid to ask questions. Now, I know you and I in business very rarely ask questions we don't know the answers to. In other words, we've done our homework, we've done our negotiation, but it actually brings in a climate of trust, doesn't it?
Well, it frustrates the living daylights out of some of the people around us, but yes, it does bring in a climate of trust. I agree. When you're talking about asking questions, Michael, you're talking about, I think you say in the book, always ask why. Do you think people are afraid to reveal what their true motives are when they're in this negotiation process?
I think people are nervous about negotiation. And again, especially if money's involved, especially if large sums are involved, like real estate. But the agent, the selling agent, actually represents the seller and shields them. So they won't often tell you exactly why they're selling. The best thing is to buy from a motivated vendor, isn't it? Somebody who really wants to sell. And even in today's market, there are people who have to sell because of death, because of divorce, because of financial problems, because they're moving interstate. But the agent's not going to put a sign up saying, motivated seller, please give me your best offer. But it's worth asking, why are people selling? And again, you don't always believe everything that you've been told, but listen carefully. And in general, you should be letting the other person speak a lot more than you are.
Yeah, 100%. You talk about leverage points in the book, and what you say is that those with the most leverage come out on top. Talk to me about these 3 leverage points that you speak of.
Well, one is information. The person with the most information often is at an advantage. And that's why you should do your homework and your research, whether it's buying a television before you go into Harvey Norman or JB Hi-Fi. There's so much information online already. You can have a good idea of what's going on. Otherwise, you could be swayed to the one that may not be the best for you, but has the highest margin for the retailer, or they get kickbacks. We know that car dealers get different incentives at different times of the month as well. So go in with the information you want. And as we already said, know what you want. So the person with the most information has got a point of leverage. Time's also another one. If you're not under pressure, if you've got options, then you're not going to be as forced to make a decision that you may regret later on. And power or other options is, I guess, another very big negotiating leverage point, where if you've got no options, then you've got to do the deal, even if it's not suitable for you at the time. So there are occasions when you are on top of the negotiation, having more information, more time, more power, more options, but you don't always necessarily reveal them straight away. But over time, you just let out to the selling agent, oh, that's okay. I actually do like this property, but there's another one down the road and he'll know about it, and you can actually talk about the options. I mean, I know that at Business Accelerator Mastermind, we've got a lot of clients who start off from small people who are one-man businesses to a multi-car franchise. And I've often thought that's not a business I'd like to be in, where if I'm selling a particular brand of car, I know I've only got to go 10 kilometres, 20 kilometres down the road and there's another one. So it's actually hard to create scarcity if you got just a commodity market.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely 100%. You and I were talking about this the other day because, Michael, that we currently have our eye out for another home. And one of the things you said was, the good thing about it is, Mark, is that you're in no hurry. So time is on your side. So I can have conversations with real estate agents, but I am quite literally in no hurry. I've obviously got information on my side, but I guess if you have information and time on your side, that kind of puts you in the power seat as well, doesn't it?
Very much so. Yes, it does. And again, I've made impulse purchases, you have too. Boy, did I make a few of those through COVID. So yes, there's retail therapy. And does it matter for the small purchases? Not really. But again, if you're a smart negotiator, with the big purchases, it can make a big difference to the bottom line.
How is that new robotic ironing thing, or whatever it is that you bought online?
Well, during COVID, there were 2 sorts of days, being locked down in Melbourne for so long. Those days that you bought something online, and then the other days when you threw them out because you didn't really need them anymore.
I thought you were going to say those days when you bought something electric and those days you bought something from Dan Murphy's. But anyway, we've spoken about what people need to be aware of, what people need to be on top of. Let's talk about the mistakes that people make. What are the most common mistakes that you see people make in negotiating?
Well, one of them, as we mentioned a bit earlier on, was becoming emotionally involved. And that's particularly difficult if it's property. Now, if it's your home, you're allowed to be emotional. And that's why you need somebody on your side to actually temper the emotion with also some sense, and why our buyers agents at Metropole help a lot of home buyers, not just property investors, because one of the things that we do is we allow them to be emotional about the house, but not about the deal, because once it gets to the money, then they shouldn't let their emotions get involved. So emotions are one of the mistakes. The other is not doing enough homework or research, and that's to do not just with property, but with a whole lot of other things. But boy, have I seen people go off and make the mistake of buying the first property they got involved in, but they saw, because they were, I guess, persuaded, influenced by smart marketers. I get these emails all the time, every day in my inbox. I like to see what other people are offering, and I think the story is, don't simply believe the selling agent or the property marketer if you haven't done your own due diligence, if you haven't seriously investigated what's going on. It's just too easy to get sucked in at the moment, because other people have learned these negotiation techniques as well.
So, Michael, take emotion out of the picture. Make sure you do your research, and I can see, again, particularly in property, for example, the benefits of using a buyer's agent that would help you to do both of those things. What are some of the other mistakes you've seen people make?
At the moment, when we're in a buyer's market as opposed to a seller's property market, where at the moment there's lots of properties for sale, not very many good ones, I'd be handling it very differently to last year, where you had to make an offer and you had to get in quickly and you had to beat the others to it. But still today, I would be submitting a sensible offer, because vendors are not desperate at the moment. There's actually very few forced sales, and so you've got to make the job of the salesperson easier. You've got to, at the moment, we know at Metropole Property Management, there's hardly any properties for lease at the moment. In fact, in Sydney, first time since 2008, we've not had one property for lease. So when you go to rent a property, my suggestion would be, have all your paperwork ready, have all your identification and your pay slips and everything all organised, so you can make it easier for the other person. And much the same when you're buying a property as well, have your finance pre-approved, make sure you've got your ownership structures in place, and get yourself in the position that when the right property comes up, you actually take advantage of the opportunity and get in before the others.
And I suppose, Michael, when you do get in, then how do you get in and sort of lock that offer in?
Well, I believe that you've got to be different to the others and put it in writing. So submit a sensible offer, knowing that your first offer is not going to be your best offer. Any property you look at, you should, I think, have three prices in your head. The one you think it's going to be worth, because you've done your homework, the price you'd like to buy it at, even though you probably won't get it at that, and then the highest price you're prepared to go. In other words, if this is the home, if this is where you want to live, it's got when you go home, your heart's going to sing and your eyes are going to light up. What price are you prepared to pay that you're not going to be unhappy on Monday that somebody else has bought it instead of you? So have all that prepared in advance, and then just go in seriously. Put an offer in writing, not too high, but serious enough, rather, because everyone can talk. Everyone can say, yeah, I'll make an offer, or what would you submit that price for? And I guess if we talk about mistakes, and yes, people are going to say I have a bias, but I think a big mistake I'm seeing people make in this market, especially in this market, which has now turned to a buyer's market, is purchasing a property and trying to do it on their own without seeking professional advice. So I'd be suggesting you should have somebody guide you through the process, whose job it is a professional property buyer who is a negotiator, a trained negotiator, as our buyer's agents at Metropole are, because they're dealing with trained negotiators on the other side. They know the language. Using a professional buyer's agent handling negotiation as well as the research, it actually levels the playing field, because, as I said, the other side are professional negotiators. You probably only bought a property once every 7, 8 or 10 years. The other thing, of course, is that there are still a lot of off-market and silent sales at the moment. So using a buyer's agent at this stage helps you find those as well.
I guess, Michael, if we go through the mistakes that you've just mentioned about not pitching the offer at the right level, not putting it in writing, being emotional, it's very easy to avoid those mistakes if you actually have somebody objective in there going to bat for you, someone who's trained, someone who's going to take the emotion out of it, and someone who's equally trained as the person on the other side.
Definitely.
Michael, I've often read this. I've often read that you shouldn't make the first offer in a negotiation. So you shouldn't kick the negotiation off. But you actually don't agree with that, do you?
Look, I don't agree. Contrary to common held wisdom, people who make the opening offer in a negotiation, they've often got the upper hand. Now, again, if you're buying a property, that's slightly different because the seller has already put a price on the property. That's a bit different. But if you're talking about negotiating your wages or other things, I believe you should make an opening offer because there's something, it's the psychologists call anchoring bias. It's one of those cognitive biases that we talk about and we teach our clients at Metropole's Business Accelerator Mastermind to understand, where people rely too much on that first bit of information they've got. So, for example, in a salary negotiation, the person who makes the first offer establishes the range of possible variation from that anchor point. So if you start high, the hiring manager may adjust the figure down slightly, but that's typically, I think it's a stronger position than starting low and trying to negotiate up. So, yeah, I disagree with the principle that let the other person go first. Set the scene.
Right. So next time we go to lunch, I'm paying 10%.
Okay. No, I thought I said you should start high.
Oh, right.
Okay. So the other is, of course, split the difference, where people say, well, okay, no, we're not talking about lunch because I eat more than you, but splitting the difference can also backfire. So a better approach, if you're in a negotiation and you're at, say, 600,000 and the seller wants 650,000, the first person to split the difference will usually be the loser. If, as a buyer, you offer to split the difference by increasing the offer to 625 from that example I gave a moment ago, the seller's classic response will be to offer to split the difference again between your 625 and their 650, and you end up with, 647, and nowhere near the 625 you really wanted. So I'd actually be going up in small increments. The split the difference, which is the courteous way of doing things, isn't the smart way of doing things.
Michael, we spent a bit of time together recently, all of our Business Accelerator Mastermind clients in an intensive in Sydney, spent 3 days together. But one of the things we did talk about there, which is very much relevant to this, is in terms of growing your business and selling more of your products or services. One of the things I liked that came out of that session, which is also from your book, is the concept of waiting for a response. So there's actually great value sometimes, isn't there, in sort of just being quiet, making an offer and then sitting back and waiting?
It's actually very difficult to be quiet. People feel awkward with this during a conversation, but patience is a virtue in negotiation. Once you've made an offer, it's important just to wait. Stop. If they won't respond to your offer, then you could maybe walk away, but don't be tempted to make another offer, another suggestion, unless they come back with something as well, because that's actually a strong message to them that you're keen, that you're probably going to be able to be taken advantage of. So be careful what you say also. You don't say, this is my highest offer, or this is the most that I can pay, take it or leave it. That can work against you, because if the seller doesn't accept your offer, you can't with credibility go back on that. Having said that, as a buyer's agent, we have the ability to do that, because we can say to the selling agent, this is the highest price my client is going to go. And if it's not accepted, we can come back a little bit later and say, hey, I'm really glad we're speaking. I'm glad you told me what your vendor wants. I was able to convince them to go a bit further. And so the buyer's agent who's representing you can, with credibility, go back a second time for a second bite of the cherry, which is very much harder to do as a person. Now, you can't do it over and over again, and they get suspicious if you do it a few times in a row. But you talk about Business Accelerator Mastermind. I remember the last intensive, actually the second last one, where we spoke about the various negotiating styles. And I know that was a really great, well-received topic, and there's a whole chapter in my book about you've got to negotiate differently with different people. Analytical people don't like the negotiating style of outgoing people, and outgoing people find it difficult to work with slower talking, quieter, down-to-earth people. So as a salesperson, you've got to understand different personality styles, but similarly, if you have a particular style, you should understand how salespeople come across and not get turned off by them. But that's one of the real interesting topics that is in Negotiate, Influence, Persuade. So it's important to understand where you're coming from, and if you're a salesperson, how other people are going. But we got sidetracked a bit because, as I was starting to say, the Business Accelerator Mastermind doesn't teach the normal write a business plan and follow this outline. We actually teach our clients, people in the tribe who are actually successful business people, entrepreneurs, small business people and professionals, the sort of things that you don't necessarily get in books, but Mark, that you've learned over a number of decades of being in business and coaching a lot of successful business people.
Yeah, it's a little bit like your book, Michael. It comes from experience, but it also comes from just thinking outside the square a little bit and not following what everybody else does. And that's the sort of techniques that we've been able to apply to the program, and some of the great things that people will find in your book.
Now, we've spoken a lot about my book, but you've got a book, Build a Business, Not a Job. And I like it because it's basically based on what we help our clients with the Business Accelerator Mastermind.
Yeah.
Some people wouldn't understand that, though.
No. The problem I think with coaching often is that people think that, I already know it all. And I often say this, Michael, as a coach, the two things I hear is I know that and I used to do that. But the point is that I know you know it, but you're not doing it. And I know you used to do it, but you're not doing it anymore. So the smart people that we have in the program, and, they're all at different levels in their business, but they're all looking to do the same thing. They're all looking to grow the business to that next level so that they can actually earn more money while working less and having the business that's a lot less reliant on them. And using a lot of these techniques from your book is a very integral component in what we help them with.
Well, you've been my business coach for over a decade, and as I saw how well you helped me, you helped our clients that we referred to you. We became business partners with Caroline, your wife, a number of years ago, and we've built our own business. Now, people will say, well, if that's the case, why are you still working in it? Basically, because I think we're still having enough fun to be enjoying it.
Oh, I love it. I mean, that's the thing. You and I are the same. We often talk about that. Why are we still doing it? Because we love it. And you know, Michael, the other thing too, and I got this out of the intensive. And by the way, just for the listeners, what is an intensive? An intensive is...
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
well, you and I know what it is. We and I know what we're talking about. No one else knows.
An intensive is when we get all of our members in our Mastermind program together in one spot. We do it 3 times a year, once on the Gold Coast, once in Sydney, once in Melbourne. And we actually spend 2 days dedicated to working on the business. And the thing I love about that is they don't just get to work with you and with me and with some of the amazing guest speakers that we have. They get to sort of collaborate with each other, and there's a real community attached to it.
I think that's one of the differences between our program and others. It's actually not done by you where you watch things on the internet. It's actually done with you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's what I was going to say. The thing that I loved about the intensive is sitting back and watching people have these aha moments and then watching them implement it and making it happen. And that's why you and I continue to do what we do.
So while we spoke a lot about negotiate, influence, persuade, if you're in business, if you're a professional, if you'd like to actually get more time, more freedom, more money, sounds like an outrageous claim, but go to metropolemastermind.com.au and I'll leave a link in the show notes. Find out about what we do, but more importantly, just click on the link and have a chat with Mark. Find out, Mark, I know you're happy to actually have a chat with them to see what their options are and explain how you can help them. And I know you're also honest because sometimes you say, actually, no, that's not for us.
Yeah.
We can't help.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of people we speak to that for whatever reason the program isn't for them. And what we do there is give them the help we can and then see if we can steer them off to the right person for them to speak to.
But I think moving forward for the rest of this year and probably for the first part of next year, it's going to be it's going to be a different economic climate for business people, for entrepreneurs. Forget property investors. We've gone off the topic of property for just a moment. And so therefore, I think one needs to, go back to basics, but you've actually got to use the right frameworks. You've got to use the right strategies. Otherwise, if you just get carried away by the challenges of the moment and you bury your head in the sand, when the markets turn, when business improves, when the economy improves, you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Oh yeah, you're starting from a standing start or way back from the starting line. So what we're looking to do is to not listen to the naysayers, not listen to all the news that simply sells time on the media, and focus on the strategies that we know work regardless of the cycle that we're in.
Well, not totally sure how we got onto that from negotiation, but having said that, that's what you do all your days helping our clients and helping, in fact, the directors of Metropole and me as my unreasonable friend as my business coach. So I would highly recommend it. Have I got a vested interest? Yes, I have. But in fact, I think, again, if I'm negotiating and influencing people to do this with the correct intent, with the intent of helping their business, then I'm not ashamed of recommending people go to metropolemastermind.com.au, leave us your details and have a chat with Mark Creedon. And Mark, thanks for having a chat about my book.
Michael, it's been a pleasure and I look forward to seeing the new edition.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset message today, I'd like to share with you one of the lessons that I learned from one of my early mentors, the late Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn said, "Don't be a complainer." He explained there's room for legitimate complaining, but if you let this deadly disease, the disease of complaining, loose, it will conquer you. He said complaining can take over your life. He said it can destroy you and leave you without anything. Jim Rohn said nobody wants to be with a complainer. Nobody wants to promote a complainer. Nobody wants to live with one. Nobody wants to be a partner with one. Nobody wants to be around a complainer. Jim Rohn said complaining leaves you out of more opportunities than you can possibly imagine, especially if you let it take over, if you let it grab you by the throat. Now, Jim Rohn gave a great analogy. He said, if you don't think complaining is bad, ask the children of Israel, the children of the Old Testament fame. He said, they're typical of all of us, but their story just happened to get into the book. Jim Rohn explained, the story says the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt. God performed a series of dazzling miracles and gets them out. Now they've got their freedom and they're heading for the promised land. But the tragedy of the story here, they never got there. They never got to the promised land, did they? And the reason was from day one, they started to complain. They griped about their food. They had just been delivered from slavery, and there they are complaining about their food. They whined and cried and griped about the water. In the desert, they had water to drink, but it didn't taste that good. They whined and complained about their leadership. They'd just been delivered from slavery. And then they complained it was too hot, too cold, too far, too difficult, too rocky. They whined and they cried for years, 40 to be exact. And finally, God said, I've had it. Trip cancelled. So Jim Rohn says the story says that they died in the desert and never reached the promised land after all that trouble. Jim Rohn believes the story's got two good teachings for us, and I agree with him. Number one, he said, indulging in complaining long enough and you're going to get your future cancelled, future promotions, future opportunities. And the second lesson is, even God himself can only take so much complaining. I guess you've got my point, haven't you? Complaining is not for winners in life. You must focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. You must focus on opportunities, not on difficulties. And when you do this, you're not only going to inspire yourself, but you'll be an example for others around you to follow you as well. So there's a great lesson from one of my early mentors, Jim Rohn. Don't be a complainer. Don't be a whinger. There's no such thing as a rich victim. I hope my chat with Mark today gave you some insights on how to become a better influencer, negotiator, persuader. And remember, if you'd like to get a copy of my book, go to michaelyardneybooks.com.au or to the website negotiateinfluencepersuade.com.au, which is the name of my book. It's become an international bestseller, translated into lots of different languages, and I hope you're going to get some insight from it as well. Now, I'll be back again real soon, but if you got some benefit from this and you know somebody else who'd also benefit from learning this information, tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast, or why not tell the world by leaving a review wherever you're listening to this. You can follow me in between each show on social media, or why not listen to some of the old shows, because there's so much information from my various guests there. I've also got a way of saying thank you to you for listening to the show. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. I'll leave a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, and I've got a bundle of books and reports for you. You can follow me on social media, Michael Yardney, or my private Facebook group, the Property Update private Facebook group, and I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?